Welcome to Pennsylvania in Focus. I'm Kristen Smith, Pennsylvania editor for the Center Square, and joining me today is the Center Square's Pennsylvania reporter, Anthony Hennon. This week, we're going to talk about college enrollment at the state-run system, which has been for years kind of in a very downward spiral, but it seems like things are finally starting to stabilize. Anthony, tell us what Pashy had to say.
Yes, I mean, there's some good news and some bad news scattered throughout here. This has been a long-term trend where you look nationally. State flagship universities have been growing, but the regional schools, not so much. There's been a dramatic drop. In Pennsylvania, this has been a bigger problem as we see population kind of stagnating or people leaving the state to go elsewhere. Pennsylvania's state system of higher education between 2012 and 2022 lost about 22% of the student population. So it's been kind of a long, dramatic decline. And that has spurred some fairly dramatic changes. We've seen a few 6 state universities combine into 2. We've seen a lot of kind of freezing tuition, which has been done for, I believe, 6 years in a row now, 5 or 6. So that kind of this sort of crisis has spurred some change, and it looks like it's sort of starting to pay off. On Monday, the state system announced that their first-time student enrollment jumped 3.4% for fall 2023, and that represents a 10% increase since 2021. So, it's starting to look like we are attracting some new first-time students, especially in about half the universities. We've seen some significant growth. Of 7 universities, there's a 9% enrollment growth overall. The biggest boost came at East Stroudsburg University, which saw a 21% growth in first-time enrollment for a degree or for a certificate. And that was followed by Cheney and Indiana universities, both of them getting about 15%. So we're seeing some increase. We're seeing some stabilization here. But there's also some bad news here. Total enrollment throughout the system fell 2.2%, which is not as dramatic as we've seen in some recent years. So it does seem, there's still concern that overall there's some decline here, but there's some sign of hope for the near future. It's looking like we may be rebuilding that base.
It's not just declining enrollment over the last 10 years, though, that's given the system financial problems. You mentioned in your story that other investments into the campuses haven't exactly helped the situation. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of these universities, I believe almost every school except for Cheney, they're still carrying debt from residence halls that they either renovated or constructed to attract new students. The idea here is if you can compete with other universities on amenities, give students a nice dorm room to stay in, some other things around campus, that may help boost those numbers. That doesn't really look like it's paid off. In some schools like Edinburgh University, which is now part of Penn West, Edinburgh merged with California and Clarion. But Edinburgh has moved to sell off dorms due to low occupancy. So there are those kind of mistakes of the past are still lingering, still giving the university trouble. But it does seem with that trouble, with that crisis, it's forced leaders and officials to really be willing to make some dramatic changes. Kind of the looking ahead and looking long term at the strategy that the PASSY system is using now. They're aiming to grow enrollments by 20%, and a lot of that is coming, one, from a $200 million funding boost that they received in 2022, but also trying to attract more students for high-demand careers, either steering new students into high-priority programs, like healthcare and STEM, business, but also offering certificates aimed more at people who may have dropped out of university. They may be a few credits away from a degree or certificate, so they want to get them in that stream. Or older Pennsylvanians who are looking to pivot in their careers. And so PASSY is looking to offer more certificates and kind of careers that have higher demand as a way to bring people back in who may be looking to jump into some new job and some new career, hoping to goose student numbers that way and get revenue up.
So it sounds like policymakers really are leaning on the system to play a huge role in reshaping the workforce problem that we have. Not just increasing enrollment and making students come here or keeping the students that we have here, but really playing to our strengths as far as what kind of industries we can offer as far as employment goes. And then also you talked about massive change. And I mentioned it a little bit. A couple of years ago, the system decided to do this massive redesign where several universities in the East and West were combined. And at the time, that was not billed as a massive cost-saving measure, but rather a strategic move to help keep the system afloat. So it'll be interesting to see as we get further into the out years whether that was something that they feel like paid off. But objectively speaking, these numbers are starting to give a hint of where perhaps the system is going, especially in light of Penn State and some of the other big state-related universities just not being able to commit to tuition freezes. Listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. For Anthony Hennon, this is Kristen Smith. Please subscribe and thanks for listening.